Welcome back to another episode of the Hooper's Almanac. Adam is out. The man is either seeing a movie, he's sick, I'm not sure what he's doing, but he's out in San Antonio tonight. So I went a little north and I brought in help from Minnesota and I brought in our Timberwolves insider with SB Nation, Andrew Carlson, which I'm super excited about. So we'll talk about some Timberwolves with him. And then we're also going to do some talk about the East and some top teams in the West. So it'll be great. But before we get going, let's bring in our friends from Green Top. At least someone laughs at it now. Adam just sits there with such a stoic face whenever I do the hair flop. Like I said, we had to send up north for our guy up in Minnesota, Andrew Carlson with SB Nation. It's been too long, my man. How you been?
I'm doing well, Mitch. I'm doing well. How
You're
about
sucking down
yourself?
some water. You're sucking down water is what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I got to get the pipes ready. After a little bit of a delay in setting things up, my bad with technical difficulties.
It's all good.
No, I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Things are good. I think it's my fourth season now on Wolves, which has been crazy. I feel like it's been at this point almost like 15 years of how many things have happened in that period of time. But
Sure.
um, no, it's great. It's great. Things are good.
Good, man. I love to hear it. And I was trying to think about last time we were on together. Was it right as we were heading into the Western Conference Finals?
Yep, game seven.
Oh, right
Game
after
seven.
Nuggets Timberwolves when Aaron was just in the deepest, darkest of pits.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And Aaron also then at that point ensued to say that, oh yeah, I don't think there's any issue. It's going to be Wolves in probably 5 or 6.
And then
To which
only
to which I agreed with him. I mean, I thought that at that point it was going to be the Wolves in probably 7. Um, man, were we both very misguided people. But yeah, I think it was game 7. I think it was game 7.
I was gonna say, and then I think it's always around January we bring you on though. It's like it's either
Sure.
January, end of December, we bring you on because either the Wolves have just turned sideways or the Wolves have just gotten really fucking good, which was what last year it was really freaking good. And so I'm looking at this year. There was we should have brought you on during the summer and it's my fault that we didn't do this because we should have brought you on to talk about the big trade. And we're 2 months out of it. I mean, no more than 2 months. We're over 2 months into the season at this point. And my first thought is this: on a scale of 1 to 10, I am happy where I'm at, and there is no regret. To 10, can we set the fire alarms off and push the button and mash it and send the nukes away? How far into regret are you that this trade actually happened?
Um, I think like at least for me, and I think where Wolves fans at this point really should be at is still giving everything like I think max like a 4 in
Really?
my head.
Okay.
Because I think you have to understand the reasons that it happened. Like I don't
Sure.
think the reason that it happened was because Karl Anthony Towns was doomed in Minnesota and that they realized that he wasn't going to progress any further and that he was a negative to the team or anything of that sort.
Right.
Um, the reality of the situation is that the second apron is an absolute monster of a rule that was instilled after the Rudy Gobert trade. I mean, that's something that the Gobert trade was made, and the idea at that time was ownership was willing to pay the luxury tax
Right.
under the old CBA.
Mm-hmm.
But when the new rules were put into place with the second apron and the different tiers of luxury tax and what you can and can't do when you're over the second apron, it became almost immediate at that point that the day that Towns signed that Supermax extension, there was going to be a point in time in which he was traded. Whether it was this past offseason, which nobody expected. I mean, that was an absolute shock to everybody.
Right.
Or next offseason, it was almost certainly going to happen at some point in time. The thought behind that is if it were to be next offseason, you're coming to a point where every team in the NBA is expecting Karl Anthony Towns to be traded. There's two ways to look at that. Does that create a market for him? After last season, I would say no. He's
Not with how the season ended, no.
correct. He was a player with 4 more years on his contract at $60 million per, essentially. Um, and that's a really hard thing to do
Yeah.
when you have these CBA rules in place. Look at Jimmy Butler right now. I mean, granted, I would say KAT's a better player than Jimmy Butler, but I'm just
Well,
saying
you
using
also
that
have
as
a
an
nice distaste of Jimmy Butler for many
correct.
multitude of reasons.
There's no two ways about that. But the Jimmy Butler thing is definitely a very much so a showing across the league that trading star players at this point in time, whether they be a top tier star, that's going to be a little bit easier, but a player like a 15 to 30 in the league, that's just a difficult thing to do. Because you have to have a team who's a willing partner or someone who can go into the apron for a season or two. All of that to say that if this were to happen next offseason, teams know that, and I think you're looking at a scenario in which you maybe have to attach a pick to Karl Anthony Towns. You might be getting something back that's less than stellar.
Sure.
And so that's a situation that becomes you're giving up a really good cornerstone franchise player that's been here for 10 years at that point in time for a return that's frankly not incredibly beneficial. And you're probably taking on some bad salary for yet another year after this one. So that's where I think the logistics behind that trade are. The other thing, too, is you're getting back at Julius Randle, who has a player option at the end of the year that's a little bit of an elephant in the room. No
I was going to say
question.
that was a later question that we'll get to in a second, but yes, go for it.
Correct. And there's moves that you can make around that. But at the end of the day, you simply cannot keep Karl Anthony Towns on the roster at his current deal and also be able to re-sign Naz Reid or Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That was an absolute no-go. So you have to have the utmost of confidence that Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, and Anthony Edwards are a championship core and that you're going to be able to sign minimum guys around them in order to compete. The Western Conference Finals run, granted, Karl Anthony Towns is an unbelievable player, and he's showing that this year. It doesn't happen without Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Naz Reid. I mean, that's just at the end of the day, that's an indisputable fact. And so I think you run into a pretty sticky situation there, and the reason that the trade was executed. The other prong of it is Donte DiVincenzo. He was ultimately the one that tipped things over. He was the one that ultimately tipped the scales in the favor of the trade happening. I think from what I had been able to gather, he was not on the table. Like the Knicks had this offer out for a while and wanted Towns for a long time. I mean, KAT to the Knicks was a rumor that had been
in the works,
swirling for a long time, but that was just something that the Wolves had kept hanging up the phone on until Donte DiVincenzo was made available, and that piqued interest a little bit more in order to make it happen. So there's a couple things there that I think are in play. You have flexibility now with Julius Randle and his player option. You're taking 4 years of a $60 million contract. You're converting that into a $30 million player option after the year. You have Donte DiVincenzo, who has been playing much better as of recent. He still has 3 more years left at 11 per, which is a really good contract given everything that's given actually how frugal you have to be as an NBA team at this point in time. And then you also have a first-round pick that could very well convert if the Detroit Pistons make the playoffs. So
that's fair.
The optics of it are bad right now. There's no question about it. And I think like if you look at it like from the view of the Knicks got rid or the Wolves got rid of KAT because of the trade was made because of talent and fit on the roster and all of these things. Like, yes, it's a bad trade. There's no question about it. But you have to look at it from the lens of they made this trade so that 2-3 years down the road, they have much more financial flexibility to build around Anthony Edwards. And that's really, at the end of the day, what they're trying to do.
That is probably the most optimistic and way to think about it. And I appreciate it because that's the thing I think most NBA fans, like general NBA fans and even maybe like big tier people don't even think about is like you're thinking about the here and now. The Timberwolves have been like kind of thinking. I mean, you as a franchise, you have to think about the future a lot more as a smaller market team and as a team that can you draw players then to bring in Anthony Edwards, which I kind of love the idea of. But now it's just like, okay, what piece could you move to get the player that you need to surround Ant with? So that was the one thought I was trying to think about, because clearly $33 million for Julius Randle is not like something terrible. I mean, correct me. Is that not easy to move in your mind?
It could be. That's actually, that's a good question. You'd have to probably go to a team that's willing, like, to kind of go with that. Yeah, like where my head went probably 2 months ago was like, if Atlanta wanted that and you get like a backup center and Clint Capella back and any potential role, like you're not going to get a return.
And then they made the semifinals for the NBA Cup, and you're like, man, maybe not.
Correct. But the other thing about that too is like, whether it looks good or bad, like Chris Finch like believes in the guy. He loves Julius Randle. I don't personally, like, I don't see it.
I'm not. That's my follow-up question. Do you believe in Julius Randle?
I'm not a Julius Randle guy personally. Like, I think his fit is a little weird. He slows the game down quite a bit. I think the idea behind acquiring him at first was that he can rebound the ball and then also push in transition. That hasn't really happened recently. And in the half court, he can kind of slow things down a little bit, which I think players like Naz Reid and Ant don't really thrive off of as much. And I think it can tend to be a little bit of your turn. Is that a great defender?
No, that has been shown by many Twitter clips.
He can be. I think he's more useful in some matchups than the Twin Towers lineup was last year. In defensive matchups, a la Zion, when they played a week ago, I think that was a much better matchup for Zion Williamson. I think it's a much better matchup for Luka Doncic in switching situations. So I think there's things there that you can look to. But for me personally, he's a bit too passive for my liking. I think there's a lot of things about the offense that kind of just slow down around him, that he kind of has to slow down around him.
Yeah.
But ultimately, like, I mean, you ask Chris Finch, like, it is a genuine thing that you can kind of palpably pick up on. Like, he believes in the guy. To when, like, they were together in New Orleans.
Wow.
Finch was the offensive coach there. Randle kind of had that little resurgence after the Lakers when he was part of the AD trade. He likes Julius Randle, and like, I don't know. I think he thinks he can get to lineup combinations where Randle can thrive. Over the last like 3 weeks or so, you've seen him stay out there after the starting lineup kind of goes to the bench. You've seen him stay out with the bench unit. He kind of finds something with DiVincenzo, Nikhil Alexander-Walker, and Naz a little bit. They've been able to kind of string some offense together. So I think that's the ultimate hope. I don't think that he's somebody that's going to be around after this year, but I am legitimately, when I say that, I would not completely rule it out.
So, two things I noticed when I was doing research for this. Your pace has not changed at all. Literally, it's the exact same thing. So it's not like you're moving, like you said, it's not like the ball is moving any quicker, but it's not moving any slower. And then your defensive rating isn't as bad as I thought it was. It's like, and not as different as last year. Last year, you're also number one in defense. So, take that with a massive grain of salt. So little regression, but not much regression. And so in my head, I'm like, all right, are the advanced numbers like overdoing it for me to think, okay, is this defense better than I'm actually thinking it is? Or is it still, like you said, there's still some moments of like defensive IQ that I think, because you have insane defenders. You really do have incredible defenders in McDaniels and Alexander Walker. Gobert is, as much as people want to crap on him, is still a very good defender. And you have an entire lineup that is just full of like dogs, and it's insane. But it truthfully shows, like, you tell me, end of Memphis on Sunday. What was that? Saturday? Sunday? Was that Sunday? How brutal was that? for you?
It wasn't good. I mean, it wasn't good. I mean, at the end of the day, there are legitimate, because there was a stretch in December, maybe it was early December, where the Wolves had a ridiculously low defensive rating. I think it was like 105 or 106 in the first like 8 games of December, where they really were starting to kind of turn things around defensively. The problem is that Rudy Gobert has not been as good this year as he was last year. That's really for two reasons. One, he's regressed on the glass a little bit. He hasn't been as dominant in controlling the glass and controlling the paint as he was last year. But two, without Karl Anthony Towns, he's not able to roam as much. He's taking more matchups down low in the post, and he's frankly like his 4 defensive players of the year. He is not as good of a one-on-one defender, as you would think he is. He makes his money, and he is an elite defender by being smart, cutting off angles correctly, and being a spy in the paint. Somebody else maybe take that initial matchup, and that's why he did so well last year, because KAT typically was able to do that. Randle's able to do it here and there, and that's kind of what happened in early December. But there are teams that can just kind of get them off kilter defensively, and when they're able to do that, there's just not much of a solve there, and it looks really bad. So you can really kind of get to the heart of the defense relatively easy, even though you do have some good perimeter defenders, and that's kind of the kryptonite of where things are.
I was going to say, because I'm glad you bring up a Rudy regression, because I feel like counting stats show it, but also just like there's like an effort level. It also feels like that Rudy doesn't have, and I get it. You've been like the anchor for defenses ever since you've been in the freaking league. You've been known as the Stifle Tower forever. And I think also a little bit of just being beat up by the media might also hurt you a little bit in the mental game too. But last year you had like a backup help as much as you want to call KAT as at least another center to help you out size wise. Nas isn't that. Nas isn't the size, nor is Randle, but you still have great defensive pieces on the perimeter. But like you said, it's just like you're seeing just like the rebounding numbers go down. Correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that there is a level of effort that's different between him and from like this year to past years?
I don't know if it's effort. I just think he's not physically as right as he was last year. I mean,
more exhausted, probably.
Yeah, he's not necessarily the first season he was with the Wolves. I don't think he's that because I think that there were legitimate injuries that he was dealing with that year. He had a groin injury that he was dealing with, and lower back stuff that he was dealing with all year, and he just wasn't right. So I think he's kind of somewhere in between these 2 years. He'll have his games where he's like the San Antonio game a couple weeks ago at Target Center. I think he went 17 and 15. He played really well against Wembanyama. Like he'll have those games. But last year it was every game. I mean, it was 15-15 every game. And it helped him too offensively. I think, yes, there's a little bit of a physical regression there. He's not the rebounder that he was last year, just in general. But I think too, there's two things. He's dealing with the adjustment of playing with Julius Randle on defense. That's very different than it is with Towns.
You think?
And offensively as well. The spacing's not the same. It just isn't. And I think that that's really hurting things right now in terms of just how he's able to adjust. Like he was able to be the lone roller to the basket last year. Kind of get some easy buckets. This year it's a little different. And I think the other problem too is like the hesitancy to hit him on the short roll has been a little bit of a problem for the Wolves in general too. The offense opens up, whether they like it or not. I tweeted it tonight during the game when they were playing the Wizards. He's going to have his bad games where he can't handle the ball. He has really bad turnovers. But when they look Rudy's way on the short roll, when he's rolling, it opens up the entire offense. I mean, he needs to be able to pull 1 or 2 defenders with him when he's going to the basket in order for the offense to work. And in games where they're just not looking for him or not seeing him, it doesn't work. And that's where you get things kind of spiraling out of control.
For reference, we're recording this at 10 o'clock right now on Monday night. Wolves beat the Wizards tonight. Our buddy Carl Baltimore was at that game. I don't know if you saw that.
He was doing a little bit of scouting.
A little bit of scouting.
A little bit of scouting. Yeah, a little bit of scouting.
This man is
for him.
This man has been all over the DMV watching different levels of basketball, and I love it.
Yep.
But I was just watching the game there. Late fourth quarter, Rudy has a play where he goes for it's like 4 minutes left in the game, and he catches it, goes up for a layup, and it just bricks off the backboard on a baseline layup. And I'm like, this is the clips that people find and just post on Twitter, and like, this was a defensive player of the year. But like, but you're right. There's these moments in games where like you said last week against the Spurs, he gets up for those games against like Wembanyama. He gets up for like those games when he's got the big challenge. Like you said, what was it 17 and 15 against the Spurs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He gets up for those, and that's the thing. Like you want a guy who can get up for the big moments. Yeah, on a night like the Wizards, not everyone's going to show up like that. No one. I mean, listen, I have my fair share of games where I watch Celtics, and I'm like, hey, Drew Holiday, you mind not just sitting there in the corner and going for 6-2-2 tonight? That'd be great. Or making a close game against the Pelicans last night, where making me want to pull my hair out. That was brutal. But point still being, I am fully understanding of Rudy Gobert. I mean, early 30s, right? He's like 33, right?
Yeah. No, he's still got plenty of basketball left in.
Right.
It's the games like where you get 4 rebounds against Zach Edey on Saturday. You know, like you have to be able to hold your own a little bit better than that. I think there's been other games this year where it's midway through the second quarter, and you know, the Wolves in general are having rebounding issues, and you just kind of go like, where's Rudy? What's happening here? Like, the next game was really bad. Like, that was bad for pretty much everybody. But like, there's games like Houston too, where, you know, they end up winning that one, and they have this dramatic comeback where it's a 16-point comeback in the fourth quarter, but you're getting outboarded by Şengün. Like, these are things that you just can't have.
And especially on a team that you're expected to be a title contender, or
exactly.
like at least a automatic in the playoffs.
Exactly. You can't have those types of performances. I mean, I can go down the list. I mean, there's a massive correlation here. Like, tonight against Washington, you have 11 boards, you win the game. It's on Saturday, 4 boards, lose the game. Orlando win 12 boards. New Orleans win 14 boards. Clippers win 18 boards. Detroit lost 6 boards. Boston lost 7 boards. So it's just like you see like where like he needs to rebound the basketball effectively, and he hasn't done that.
Well, the Celtics lost because Jason Tatum was guarding him, so you know that also helps. That is just this stupidest fucking thing ever. People were like, Jason Tatum can lock up 5s. Moments, yes, but he's also being just stuck on Rudy Gobert.
Correct.
Okay, can I change a little bit of the energy of this conversation?
Yeah, go for it.
A little bit. Let's do a little bit of a history because you are a big Timberwolves fan. You love the history of the Timberwolves. Outside of Kevin Garnett, though, this is my question for you. If you could add any historic Timberwolf outside of KG to this team to make them like immediate, like back in the driver's seat of the West, who would it be?
Kevin Love, early 2010s Kevin Love.
That's such a phenomenal answer.
It's not even close either.
Right.
It's not even close. He would be the best complement to this roster. Rebounding, shooting ability. I mean, if he wasn't a 40% 3-point shooter, he was pretty close in those years. And he was at high volume too. He was a very high volume. Wasn't the greatest defender, but he could definitely take the assignment of guarding the bigger player on the team and letting Rudy spy.
Mm-hmm.
He's a pick and pop threat. I mean, he is truly like, I don't think a lot of people appreciate like early 2010s Love because of the fact that he was buried on the Timberwolves. But he was a top 15 player at that point in time, probably just because of what he was able to put up with the rosters that he was on.
Mm-hmm. I've got it right here for you. So 20 is his most improved player year, 2011. 20 a game, 15 rebounds. The most
2010, 2011 or 2011, 2012?
2010, 2011. So his first All-Star year, his most improved year. It was 2015, 2 assists, and on 47, 41, 85 splits. And then fast forward to 13, 14 when he's 11th in MVP voting. In 2011-12, he was 6th in MVP voting that year. But 13-14, 26, 12.5, 4 assists on 45, 37, 82 splits. I don't count the 11-12 year as much just because of shorter games that year because of the lockout, but I like to look at those because, yeah, Kevin Love's 2 years, like the 10-11 year and the 13-14 year, because the 13-14 year is the reason why LeBron wanted him in Cleveland. That's the exact reason why you wanted him in Cleveland after that year.
Well, and here's the other thing, too. So Love in 2010, 2011, that's when he was still kind of shaving his head. That's when he did the buzz cut thing.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm recalling correctly, he shot 41% from three. His volume wasn't incredibly high. 2011, 2012 is when he started shooting the rock. Like, that's when he started letting it fly. And that was like, he might have been under 40%. He was like, I would argue that was a better shooting season for him because he was picking and popping with Rubio almost every other possession. He was sick.
He was 37% from three, but 5 a game. The next year, but he got hurt in 12-13. He only played 18 games, but not great numbers that year. Not great numbers that year for the man.
Yeah,
but yeah, that 10-14 stretch is just such a great period of time to pick Kevin Love, and I love that pick. Okay, because I had Kevin Love on my mind. And then I just thought as like a secondary scorer, but like it'd be too late for him because he just wasn't that. But the 1 year of Sam Cassell, just the 1 year of Sam Cassell where he was the All-Star in 2004, when he would have been just perfect. Because I'm going to get there. We need to talk about your point guard situation just ever so slightly.
Yeah, we do that.
But Sam Cassell was just the one guy I thought of as well that might fit perfectly because pick up the pace a little bit. Can shoot the rock and also just knows when it's his turn to not be. He can be off ball when he needs to be.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think an 11-12 Kevin Love though is like a souped up Nas Reed, and that's just like that's exactly what this team needs. Like at that spot, he would be an unbelievable fit with this team.
Fair enough. Next question: do you miss D'Angelo Russell?
I don't think anyone misses D'Angelo Russell. I'm never gonna hate personally. I think he had some good moments.
Sure.
But no, I don't think anybody really misses D'Angelo Russell.
So then that answers my next question of, so if the Nets bought him out, would you want him? But I guess you can't get a buyout guy because of the second apron.
No, I think you left some bad taste in people's mouths too. I think like there are two things can be true. I think he was a legitimately good player in 2021 when they broke, 21-22 when they broke the playoff drought. I thought that was like easily the most impressive D'Angelo Russell season that I had seen since his playoff season in Brooklyn when he was an All-Star. After that, I think things started to kind of go sour. Gobert comes in, that relationship doesn't work at all. And there's enough that happens there. I don't think anybody's going to be asking D'Angelo Russell to come back soon.
So that's, and again, I have to ask the guy in Minnesota because I know there might be a full ass starting lineup of guys who have left a sour taste in Minnesota Timberwolves fans' mouth at this point. It might not be a good roster, but it's a roster still. Jimmy Butler and D'Angelo Russell just had that up, and I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone else. Like
D'Angelo, I don't think D'Angelo Russell is even close to Jimmy. I think
no one's as close to Jimmy.
I think the thing with Russell is like he goes with sound to me quickly. I think in the locker room it wasn't great with him. I think that players only meeting the Pistons game on New Year's Eve, which is going to be something that I'm not going to forget for a while. That was mostly said about Russell. I think that there was a lot of things that he did that left a sour taste in maybe some of the teammates' mouths. And I think in Wolves fans didn't really take too kindly to the fallback in Minnesota thing either. But I think at this point, like there's like a statute of limitations on that type of thing. Like he's been gone for 2 years. Like he's relatively almost like what are you gonna do? Like okay, you're gonna boo D'Angelo Russell on the Brooklyn Nets. It's scary.
Well, if the Raptors decided to retire Vince Carter's number after this man literally quit on them for a whole freaking season, I think the Timberwolves can get over D'Angelo Russell's slight slight miswording.
Yeah, he had a great season that 21-22 year, and like I think was a major part of that playoff drought ending. So like, just drop it.
That's fair. But
That's at least my
do you like the move to the other lefty? And do you? I mean, Conley was good for you guys that the past 2 years. Maybe not so much. I mean, but this year you're seeing you draft Rob Dillingham. Why are we not playing him more?
It's a low bar for trades because there haven't been a lot of great ones, but the Russell for Nikhil like in 3 seconds is one of the
Right.
trades in
It's
franchise
insane.
history for
Insane.
sure. I mean, that was an unbelievable trade that they ended up pulling off. I think that there's a couple things to unpack with this one. I mean, the first thing is like you can't just not play Mike Conley.
You could. He's shooting for shit.
Yeah, I mean, he had a rough start to the year, but I don't think you just like DNP him. Like, I think there's a certain expectation there when you re-sign a contract. Like, there's political factors at play with things like that, where it's like I don't think you can necessarily just sit him down. The other thing too is like if you're Fitch, if you're making a change to the starting lineup, you have to be sure about it because you can't just do the snip snap thing with the point guard in the starting lineup. Like, you just have to be
okay, Michael Scott.
Correct. You have to be very sure of yourself when you're making these types of changes, especially for a guy like Mike Conley, who hasn't come off the bench since his second season, and is really just kind of like the ultimate team guy. Like, there's not a person in the Timberwolves organization that doesn't like Mike Conley. Like, he's the ultimate like team player.
Sure.
And so I think you have to be cognizant of those things. They found something with DiVincenzo starting at the point guard spot. I think he pushes pace. He rebounds really well. Which is one thing that the starting lineup had initially struggled with a little bit. He brings some energy to the floor and gets people into action. He's not necessarily your Mike Conley floor general, but like he at least gets people into the offense. And there's been some positive things that have happened with him being a point guard for the starting lineup. There's also been some positive things that have happened with Conley coming off the bench. There's no question that he's not even close to the player that he was at the peak of his career. He wasn't the player that he was last year.
Right.
But there needs to be, you still need common sense on the basketball court. And that is what his value is to this team at this time is a person who can slow things down, get people to the right spots, play situational basketball, just bring a brain to the floor. Anthony Edwards is not ready to be the brain-centric facilitator that a lot of people have been pushing him to be for the last 2 seasons. He's not there.
Okay.
Julius Randle wants to play isolation basketball too much. Rudy Gobert wants the basketball at the end of the day too. He wants to catch lobs. He wants to get hit on the rim. Like, there's things that happen in this offense that at some point, like, they have to be orchestrated. There's a point in time where Mike Conley catches a little bit of a shooting groove that the starting point could go back to where it was. But I think as of right now, it's hard to tinker with where things are when they won 3 of the last 4. Memphis was not a good game. But you have to consider when you make changes like that, the ripple effects that happen. And on the Rob Dillingham thing too, that's another interesting one because you have to find a spot for a 9th man in the rotation. Right now, that's Josh Minott.
Which I texted you. Did I not text you about Josh Minott?
Yep.
Ooh, this man just popped up on my radar, and I have not stopped watching this man.
Absolutely, and there's Rob Dillingham has played very good games this year. He has. The Houston game was one that really stuck out where they were down 19 points, and he essentially comes out on the floor as a plus 18 or a plus 19, and essentially brings the Wolves back into the game. There's also games like the Knicks game where he essentially comes out as flat as the rest of the team. And when you're the 9th man, you just can't do that. Like, you have to be able to bring something off the bench and
you have to be an additive
and make stuff work. Correct. You can't blend in with the rest of the team. And frankly, that's not what Rob Dillingham should do. Like, he's an exciting player. Like, he's the type of guy that kind of gets stuff going. So I think there's still some development there to be had. I think that it's a slow play on the coaching staff's end too. Like, you don't want to just because he's a guy that you traded up for and you picked in the first round, you just throw him in right away. I think he's a volume scorer. He needs the ball in his hands. And with those types of rookies who can tend to get a little bit careless, you saw it in Summer League. You need to be able to, like,
Ring him
slow
in.
play them in, especially when you have the luxury of having 8 or 9 already good to go rotation players. Like, you have the luxury of having him be able to play his way into the lineup and not just gift wrap him minutes. And I think that's kind of the idea of what they're doing here. Though sometimes, like, I've called for it on Twitter. I'm like, there's got to be a Rob Dillingham game in here somewhere. Like, I don't think that this is going to be something that's completely permanent. Like, by the end of the year, I think we probably see him as a little bit more of a fixture of the rotation. But Josh Minot's playing really well right now. That 9th man spot is created in the rotation, but they're not going to play 10 guys. And it's going to be a back and forth for that spot for sure. And it's going to be situational too.
Yeah. Great point. Because listen, you make the trade up to get Dillingham. That's like you needed a guy to be a backup point guard, and that's what everyone expected him to be. Didn't see him early on, and that was like the big question of why not. And you're right. Summer league games, it was the biggest red flag of like a little careless, and almost slightly heliocentric. Not slightly, pretty. But you're right. He has moments of flashes of like, why aren't we seeing more of this? It's one of those moments of like, I don't know, Mike Malone. With the Nuggets, like there's moments where he doesn't trust like his younger players as much. Finch has moments like that, but I feel like Finch is so much more open to it than playing those younger guys. And so I try to like temper because I was also the guy who at the beginning of this year said there's not going to be an all-star out of this entire draft class, and I need to really temper that because there's never been a draft class that hasn't had that. Carl Baltimore immediately after I posted that pod's like, are you just saying this is going to be history? And I'm like, there might be now. So point still being, I'm holding out hope for the Rob Dillingham factor, and I do agree the DiVincenzo move was the biggest, like, almost not fix, but it was like a temporary like duct tape to figure out what's the next step, and maybe it is the fix. Maybe because we're already seeing offenses now move away from having a traditional point guard. Anthony Edwards already brings the ball up more than half the time if it's not DiVincenzo, and so it's just like, okay, what is how much more can we see Ant facilitate rather than being this heliocentric basketball player rather than compared to like Luka and James Harden. So I am curious to see what the level of next step he has for him in that sense.
Well, the biggest hit to the Dillingham stock for sure has been the resurgence here of DiVincenzo because he was not good at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
It wasn't good at all. I mean, I wrote, I think after the Knicks game, that kind of went scored. This team doesn't have a backup point guard. There is one point guard on the roster currently that plays. That is Mike Conley.
Yep.
We need to stop with the idea that Dante DiVincenzo is a point guard. I wrote that flat out, based on the sample size that was put in front of me. But he's played much better here over the last like month and a half. Like the correlation of the success of the team, which they have been playing better over the last 3 weeks, like notably, has been him. He's hit his open threes at a better clip.
Love that.
He's not turning the ball over on drives as much as he was at the beginning of the year. It felt like it was almost every drive that he was at least topping up or throwing it. He's become a little bit more comfortable, I think, and he's mentioned that games too in the locker room. With him, it's just like at the beginning of the year, it was a little bit less comfortable. Things weren't as familiar. Julius was kind of the only player that he had some chemistry with, and so it was a little tougher for him to get acclimated. And so now I think you kind of see that with him, like getting a little bit more comfortable. I still don't think he's a point guard. Like he's not like a pure point guard or anything,
right?
But he's enough to get the starting lineup into actions, and I think right now it's going to at least put the consistent Rob Dillingham thing on hold a little bit more for the time being, because I think that there's a little bit of a point guard punch there with him and probably coming off the bench.
Yeah, it's like maybe you see it more on back-to-back nights, on back-to-back game nights, but even still, like on your basic week game, you're not going to see it. And that's the thing. I had expectations to see Dillingham because that was like one of the guys I was most excited about coming out of the draft. But then on the team he's put on, you're like, okay, this is supposed to work. And then, yeah, you're right. There's just like almost a clog in that like guard, like ball handler position. And more so that's the not, and it's not Dillingham's fault. It's the fact that DiVincenzo, like you said, has had this nice little uptick in like in production and also just like value over the past like what do you say, like 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I would say 2 3 weeks is for sure fair. I think over the last like 8 games or something, he's been averaging 16 plus points too. So it's
Yeah,
like something he's been the New York DiVincenzo over the last 2 3 weeks that I think the Wolves were trading for, that they had the idea that they were going to trade for. Like there as an organization, they are really high on him. They see him as a core piece, like moving forward. They don't see him going anywhere. Um, I mean, they're very high on Dot. Like he was the reason that the KAT trade happened was when New York made him available. So they have a lot of faith in him, and I think that they'll this is more of a version that they expected that's a little bit more integral to their success. And I think the other thing too, just on the Dillingham front, like the thing that's tough is the instant because the Wolves fan base is super rabid for it too. I think I was at points like very inquisitive as to why Dillingham wasn't making it into the lineup or getting as many minutes. I
sure.
think it's easy to want that stuff right away, but at the end of the day, too, it's the NBA is in a spot now where like development development, whether it be the G League, whether it be an end of the bench player you're starting on, like that's a legitimate thing.
Right.
Even in a Wolves micro sense, like Anthony Edwards was really bad for more than a half year when he was a rookie, like really bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't until Chris Finch came along and like got him like rolling downhill is where he started like looking like a competent NBA player. Naz Reid was in Iowa for a little over like a half year, played his way into the lineup towards the end of the year. I think we're seeing a similar thing with Josh Miner. He spent 2 years consistently on a two-way contract, and now he's starting to see some tick in the role, starting to show up a little bit. I think we'll probably down the line see a similar thing with Terrence Shannon. Like these are guys who it's like like they need a little bit of time to just like learn the game. And I think with especially in Dillingham's sense, he's so raw. I mean, you watch him at Kentucky. He was like a college Lou Williams, like maybe
Yeah.
even a little bit. Like there were times where it's like, whoa, this guy's like SEC Allen Iverson at times, where it's like that game against LSU was one of the best like second halves of basketball
Mm-hmm.
in college that I had like watched in a long time. There were flashes of that. At an NBA level, that's so much different, and especially when now he's an undersized guard, there's going to be a learning curve. If he's on a bad team, he's going to get more minutes and do that, and probably put up some pretty bad shooting splits. Or if he's on a good team, or he's on a team where he doesn't have to play right away, he's probably not going to see as much. So I think it's a double-edged sword there.
Well, you know what? I'll never forgive Naz Reid when he was on LSU, when he led LSU to a 20-plus point comeback against Mizzou. Still will never forget sitting in the press row watching that game, and that still causes pain in my soul. But
That was chubby Naz Reid too.
that
Chubby
was a
Naz Reid
little
on
tubby.
LSU.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he was even on his first year on the Wolves. Like, he was a little bit of a big body.
and you know what? He's thinned down, and you know what? Best for him. It's worked out the best for him. Question for you, or I want to move a little broader to big scope for the West. Let's look to the West a little bit, and what is the most impressive team to you in the Western Conference as of right now?
I think as of right now, it's Houston.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of questions for them, like going into an actual playoff environment. I think as a regular season team,
Mm-hmm.
namely just defensively. I think the Dylan Brooks acquisition was obviously huge there.
Defensively, yeah.
That dates back to before this year. And I think too, like their cupboards are stocked in terms of being able to trade players now as well. Like I think Jalen Green is someone who would make a lot of sense to move at some point in time. Like he's on a fairly team friendly deal. He's still young. He's a lot of scoring potential. But they have a clogged backcourt there now with Thompson and Reed Shepard's getting G League minutes. Like I think he's an NBA player. I think he needs to see some NBA time.
Right.
There's clearly like they're in a place now where it's like we're look so grim at one point. They're actually like they have an identity now, and there's clearly like they're switchable. Their offense is not as bad as you would think it is, given the roster of like down your Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks.
Dude, yeah, I don't.
In that starting
listen,
lineup.
I have dumped on Fred VanVleet so much this year because of just like I'm ready to just send the pair of guards of Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet packing and give me a better version of someone else. I am ready to send them packing. If I'm a Houston fan, I'm ready to send them packing. But like you said, this is the best version we've seen Houston since Harden years.
Yeah, in terms of actual teams that I'm impressed with, I would say Houston. I mean, again, I could be come the playoffs. I'm not quite as high on them. I think that they're very much so like exposed for 7 seed if they do end up locking in at the 2 seed where they're at right now.
Right.
But they've for sure been the most impressive to me. Like I love seeing teams that used to just be so incredibly bad just build themselves kind of back up even amid not the best circumstances and just like make smart moves too and like build something that's legitimately they can lean back that they can point to as theirs.
That it is incredibly impressive because you talked about they have just a plethora of just options that they can do this offseason. I think they're going to try to treat it this year like the Thunder did last year. Like, okay, what do we have and what is able to be moved and what can we like try to build around? And it might be a much more bigger haul or much more bigger names that are moved than what the Thunder did this past offseason. Again, Hartenstein and Caruso are nothing to just like smirk at or just like chuckle at. But I still think the pieces that Houston can move to make like their team so much better or like to upgrade some certain spots on the team while not get like losing its depth. It's such a wide margin of difference in my mind. But I do love that pick because you're right. As of right now, they're the 2 seed behind the scorched earth Thunder. And I bet they're over. And I was the most confident in any over. That was the most confident I was in any over. I was not the crazy. Like I did not think they were going to be 25-12 on January 13th. That would have been psychotic to ever think that. But super happy for them that they, like you said, it's you love seeing the teams turn it around as well as they have.
They're beating good teams, and it's like the thing is when it's not going incredibly well in terms of shooting the basketball, what are some things that you can point to that you can get either easy points or easy stops off of? And I think that Houston has that. They're one of the teams in the league that you can point to that has like an actual identity. They're not really a flash in the pan. Like I compare them to the Kings a couple of years ago, where it's like they had the resurgence season.
Yeah.
That was the top 5 seed that year.
They were a 3 seed. They were the 3 seed and they lost the 6 seed Warriors.
Yeah, they were 3. But when things got rough, when they weren't able to shoot, there was nothing that they could point to that they definitely couldn't get any stops.
Right.
All they had were Sabonis DHOs, and teams were able to defend that incredibly easy.
When Sabonis wasn't shooting because he broke his hand too.
Correct, exactly. So Houston says, "Okay, you want to switch? We can switch. You want us to not switch? We can fight over ball screens. Like, we have the personnel to be able to do that. Şengün, you can say what you want about what he does down there defensively, but offensively, late game, they can run offense around him and they can run offense through him, and it's effective. So I'm impressed with Houston. And I also too can give a shout out to Aaron Carter too, because I think the Nuggets too, despite up and down here from Murray, have been pretty impressive. I think that 4 seed's very much so up for the taking in the West. That's something where I'm looking at if I'm the Wolves and I'm saying if I can string together, a really good 15-game stretch here, that 4 seed's definitely up for the taking. That's really anybody who's in contention for it.
I was going to say, so do you not
impress me?
So do you consider the Thunder, Rockets, and Grizzlies your upper echelon of the West already? Because that's what you're saying right now. Is if you're thinking, I was going to say, there's the 3 seeds still up for grabs too.
They've impressed me, but the crazy thing about the West is it's a lot of good teams. I wouldn't sit there and say it's Oklahoma City and the Field, frankly.
Yeah,
And there's not the West is good. It's not good with elite teams though. It's a lot of very good teams that I think that are just going to end up beating each other, and it's going to be a slobber knocker down the stretch for seeds 3 through play-in.
I was
And
going to say
it's going to
there's
suck
some
for a lot of teams.
Yeah, there are some moments of like there's like elite, like so the Rockets elite defensively, not better than good on offense though. They have moments where they're good, but there's some moments where I'm like, I'm going to smash my head against this desk. But then with the Grizzlies, it is so. I hate. All right, so here's first rant. I hate that we've lost Bally because now I have to subscribe to FanDuel Sports and network, and I don't want to be paying for that, and I can't watch the Grizzlies games now.
Just got to get the season pass.
I'll be doing that for Cardinals games, but not for not a team that's not in my hometown. But the Nuggets, like you said, they have an elite player in Jokic, so it's like they have that, but their depth has always been a question to me. There's just moments of eliteness on all these teams, but it is just brought down by the fact that it's inconsistency amongst it all too. So
I like Strawther too. I think Strawther's a good player. I think
very good scorer.
They need to keep him around. That's someone that you don't.
It was, yeah, I do agree with you. I think that Strawther is a very good 6-man, and my worry is that he just becomes the next 2 guard to fill in the role because they just had a rotating door shooting guards. I worry that he's the next shooting guard that they move on from, but I hope not.
Yeah, that's a guy where it's like he's flashed enough, especially around Jokic. Don't let him leave. Let him leave. Especially, I think you can get him on a good deal too.
Yeah,
if you're extending him.
So you talk about all these good teams in the West. What we'll disclude the Rockets here, but what team do you think the Timberwolves play best against? Like what do they match up best against? Like of the, because I'm looking at it, there are 12 teams in the West that are just either sitting at or right above 500. I'm counting the Spurs as they're 18 and 19, and I don't think it's right to count them out. But the top 12 teams in the West are all good to great to insane if you're the Thunder. What team do you think the Timberwolves match up best against, though?
In terms of matching up best against, they haven't lost to the Clippers this year.
They've
won that season. They've swept that season series already. I don't think they play them again this year. So they've already swept that one. But you look at the West, and it's like there's not a lot of teams where if you're the Wolves, if you can just start playing a little bit more. I mean, I know it's the story for every other team in the West, but the Wolves have the talent to be in a much higher spot than they are currently. There's some things that they need to get figured out in terms of their offensive hierarchy. But if they can do so, there's not a lot of teams in the West that would really make you afraid. You've beaten the Rockets this year. You're 2-1 against the Lakers. I don't think they've lost to the Nuggets. I could be wrong there. I think they're 2-0 against the Nuggets, I believe.
Okay.
Feel free to fact check me on that.
On it, but you go ahead. Keep going.
You go down to the wire with the Grizzlies. I mean, that's a game, frankly, that you should win. I think that's clearly a team that you can play and you can beat them.
Mm-hmm.
The Mavericks, they beat on Christmas Day. There's no Luka. First time they played them this year in October. That one also kind of went down to the wire. That was a 4-game game. Kings, you're not worried about the Kings. The Suns, I don't think at this point you can be worried about the Suns after last year. The Warriors have been a little bit of a thorn in the side. I don't think they're a particularly good team. I think the Spurs give you a little bit of pause because they've played you pretty well this year.
Yeah.
So I mean, you look at the West, and there's really 2-3 teams that you're pretty afraid of, and I think the rest you feel pretty good about if you're playing.
So the Nuggets played the Timberwolves. The only time they played them this year was November 1st. You do play them 3 more times the rest of the season, and it was a 3-point game.
Got it.
And if I'm remembering correctly, this was Aaron Gordon goes crazy game. Yeah, 31 and 11.
He was lights out. I do remember that.
Yeah, and Murray was dog crap. He did. I think he only played 22 minutes. So I wonder if he got hurt.
And that was a game I think where they were down 8 in the final stretch, and they came back and kind of put his team behind us. 4 minutes. No, I think that the Nuggets for sure give. I mean, even in their current state, like they give you some pause. I think the Towns thing, the Towns trade, like that team last year was built to beat the Nuggets.
Mm-hmm.
This year, you have a little bit more of an issue, I think, because you probably have to end up putting Gobert on Jokic, which is a very interesting.
Can you not
I
just
just
do
don't think that's
Nas?
very. No, I don't think that's very effective. I mean, you have to put Gobert on him. Like you don't
Okay.
put Randall on him. You put Randall on Aaron Gordon. Like that's what makes sense. It's the smart thing to do. So that matchup definitely gives you pause. So that's what I'm saying. Is like I think it's Oklahoma City, it's Denver, and like your odd one out that would give you maybe a little bit of pause is San Antonio, just because the Wemby matchup's really weird, and there's
Yeah.
just if you're in a playoff series, do you trust Gobert for a full playoff series to be able to guard Wemby effectively? I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, and then you're also just saying, "Hey, Wemby, here's your first playoff series, probably against the Timberwolves team." I'd in this scenario right now, we're looking at it, and it's probably going to be a play-in game with how both these teams currently standing wise, but also the Spurs are currently out of the playoffs anyways, so
Correct.
or out of the play-in anyways. But again, that hodgepodge of 12 teams, just the top 12 teams in the West, that's what sucks, and the reason why we should move just to like the top 16 teams in the league, just make the playoffs. Because I don't want to see the Chicago Bulls playing for a play-in, and although I would love to see the Pistons finally make the playoffs, I'll say that the
Yeah,
Pistons have
that'd be
looked
fun.
great. Pistons beat the Knicks tonight too, so I'll
I
take
think
that
anyone
one.
who's a Wolves fan would also like to see the Pistons make the playoffs because then they have a first round pick this year when they otherwise wouldn't.
We love that. We'll touch one question on the East, and then I'll let you go here. But you're looking at the East, and this is not Timberwolves related at all. Can you talk to me? I mean, I know you specialize in the Timberwolves, but you watch other teams as well. But like, did you watch the Cavs Thunder game this past week? Are the Cavs just insanely impressive to you right now? And like, I mean, just what do you think has changed compared to the past 2 years in your head? But let's start with like impressiveness to you, but also like what's changed.
Yeah, I mean they're insanely impressive. I think it's their offensive execution that's for sure the thing that stood out to me just in watching that game where it's like this team isn't going to beat themselves, like they're not going to turn the ball over at very high volume.
Right.
They're good on the fast break. That was a bad Donovan Mitchell game too. So I mean that's the scary thing is like you beat the Thunder and you don't get really anything from Donovan Mitchell
Yeah.
outside of a big late shot. That
Right.
was, I think, very impressive to me. The other thing too, and I think this is going to be like, it's a little bit of devil's advocate, but I think that there was a little bit of something with OKC to me where it's like if you come playoff time, they switch so much, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a switching guy. I'm not a
Hate
big
it.
fan. No, I don't like switching. I really don't. Like I think that if it's like if a team knows that you are switching, they can just spam it over and over and over again.
Yep.
I'm thinking about teams like Dallas. I think Dallas kills switching. Um, I
Not
think a
against
team like
Boston.
no, for sure, but not a lot of teams can do that against
That's
Boston.
true.
I think
That's true.
Oklahoma City's a little bit more. I think Oklahoma City's a little bit more vulnerable. I think a tweener too, like Evan Mobley, someone who's athletic, rolls hard, is good inside of 20 feet. I
Yeah.
think that's someone who's a little bit of a thorn in Oklahoma City's side. So I mean, I think of teams like Dallas. I think of teams like the Lakers. I think of some of these teams that could give Oklahoma City trouble, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily beat them in a playoff series. Um, but I think one, yes, I found out that Cleveland is a pretty flawless team at this point in time.
Insane defensively, and their offense. I mean, with the resurgence of Mobley, their offense has been great.
100%. I think that there's two things in the playoffs that they can lean on. I think like you have your ISO scores. Allen can go get a bucket. Mitchell can go get a bucket. You play really good defense. Um, I think that's a team that's built for the regular season and how they execute offense, and built for the playoffs with how they can go get a bucket when they need to. Really, really, really impressive. And I did think it told me some things about KC, and flawed
and vulnerable. Yeah, they have spots that you can attack, and
Yeah. And if
I
you can
think
play in the Cleveland played a zone against them, and it was pretty effective. I mean, they really
yeah,
did have a tough time against a zone, and that was something that stuck out to me a little bit because if you can get Shea to start putting threes up, and you say nope, we're not gonna like it's really hard to do, but we're gonna do everything we can to not let you get to the elbow. That can cause some issues for them too. So
it felt like. I mean, that's what Houston. I mean, that's what Miami did to Boston like years ago, like in the playoffs. They like in 22, Miami's like, hey, we dare you to just take, and then in the bubble too, they just like, we dare you just to take jump shots. We just dare you to take anything that's a three and create it for yourself and not get in your regular flow of offense. And that's what Cleveland did against Oklahoma City, and that was insanely impressive. Now it does help to have the size that Cleveland has, just with
yes,
their version of the Twin Towers in that sense. But
yep,
I love just their rotation of guys that they have that come in and out of the game, and with Strus coming back and working his way back, it's gonna be really tough to just not be afraid of him as a Celtics fan, as I continue
yeah.
to be afraid of them. So
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely would be too. I think if there's a team in the East that is the personnel to do it, um, that's not the Celtics. It's Cleveland. Um, yeah, they look really good, man, and I think they did a really good job of kind of in those switches off of screens. I think they did a really good job kind of catching Hartenstein flat-footed too.
yeah.
Because he moves well, but I think that again, when you switch as much as Oklahoma City does, you're destined to find a little bit of a weak spot. I think they found that a little bit.
It also helps when you bring on Damari Carroll as an assistant coach, and Mizzou made there. It really
Correct.
does. It
Correct.
does help in that sense. Okay, final question. Letting you go. We do this every time with you. Final question. Give me the finals prediction as of right now. Again, it's freaking mid of January, so we got a 5 months until we're crowning anyone. But talk to me. What's your right now thoughts about it?
I'm sure a lot of people you have give you kind of like OKC Boston.
Sure.
I'm assuming that's probably where a lot of people go. I'll zag a little bit just for thought exercise.
Let's do it.
I'll give you Dallas and I want to say New York, but it's just not.
No,
Like
I agree.
I really do want the Knicks to get there. I really do. They are such a fun team. But I do think it's going to be Boston at the end of the day. But I'll say Dallas out of the West just because I think Oklahoma City gets to the conference finals. There's just something in watching them. They are a machine right now. They close games out. They do it systemically. Where they just slam the door on teams.
Yeah.
There's just something that is telling me during that Cleveland game where it is a playoff setting against a team that is not like they're not making any mistakes. That there's some like a team like Dallas can find a spot in that defense
Mm-hmm.
and press down a little bit in a series, and especially if you can get a Luka and Kyrie hot, I can see a Dallas beating in Oklahoma City in a playoff series.
Fair enough.
If they're fully healthy, this Luka thing does not look good right now. It doesn't at all.
That's why
So
I'm like monitoring Dallas. I'm like, do we have just another like month away from Luka, and we're gonna be talking as Dallas not even in the playoffs or like in the playoff picture, like play-in picture. So I'm continually monitoring that. Yeah, mine right now is because I think you're right. To me, there is a flaw in the Thunder, and I'm going to go see it live in February. My brother and I were traveling to Memphis to go see the Grizzlies Thunder. So hopefully a good game. But that's because that's who I'm picking right now. It's Memphis and Cleveland, and I want to give Memphis more time and thought process. But like the jump that Jaren Jackson has made this year has been incredible. They continuously put out just weird depth that I don't understand it. And even when Morant hasn't played all these games, Scottie Pippen Jr. has been good. Bane hasn't looked like is unguardable as he was like a year or two ago, but he still has good nights. So And I am just totally mystified with the whole Zach Edey thing, and I want to figure out if this is like a good. Is this the best version of what could this be like the best version of what Steven Adams was? There a bigger version of Steven Adams who can be a little stronger and also a little bit better of a post player. So trying to figure that out a little bit more too. So that's where
I can see it. Yeah, the Thunder just feel to me like it feels a little bit too easy to make that pick. It feels a little bit it feels right now like it's a little bit too easy for them. And I feel like oftentimes when you have those teams, this is also kind of a little bit of a bias towards switching. I don't love these switching teams, but two, it just when you get these teams who are going to be like 65 win teams, and it just feels too easy. Oftentimes you get in the playoffs and they face a little bit of adversity, and they go, "Oh shit, we're going to be playing this team 5 more times," and there's a little bit of panic that sets in, and there's issues that sometimes happen when backs go up against the wall. That's just where I'm at with the Thunder. I think they still make it deep in the playoffs. I still think they're an all-time good regular season team.
Yeah.
Still don't see them making the finals this year.
Okay. I appreciate it. Carlson, where can people find you just to keep following your content?
Yeah, you can find me on X at Andrew_Carlson2. I tweet on X.
It makes no sense. We tweet on X.
We tweet on X. It's never going to be an X. It's never going to be a post. It will always be a tweet.
As it should be.
I tweet on X at Andrew_Carlson2. And you can find my blogs up at canishoopus.com, CANIS. I'm going to be putting something together about Jade McDaniels here shortly. Just kind of how his role is this year and how we need to figure out what he is, because you're paying him $25 million a year, and it's a very ambiguous role right now. And also, too, like we talked about a Julius Randle trade, that Jade McDaniels is someone that's kind of stuck in my mind recently, of someone who, that's another possible movable piece if you really needed to make a change and you really believe in Julius Randle. So we'll see.
Now you got me thinking like I might need to go through like my trade machine over here and try to figure out something. Thank you.
It's not overly likely, but if you really do believe in Julius Randle and you want to re-sign Nas and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I mean that's your likely trade chip.
You're feeding my addiction over here, and I don't know if I appreciate that. Thanks, Carlson, for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We will be back next week talking more than just Timberwolves, but we will be talking probably still about the Timberwolves as we get closer. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Go Celtics, go Timberwolves, and go Spurs, and have a great rest of your week, y'all.